have an exciting night tonight. I am very excited about this discussion tonight. For all of you that normally join me on My Story Mondays and are aware of what that is, this is a little different. So, no, you are not confused. It is indeed Tuesday. However, I really wanted these individuals who are joining me tonight to have this discussion. So I rearranged everything to make sure that I can have these experts on tonight with us. Yes, experts. That is correct. So that's why we are coming to you on Tuesday. So come on in. They are coming in pretty fast as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. I am going to let everyone introduce themselves as well, and then I'll introduce myself and then talk about the topic at hand tonight. So I'll start in my upper right corner, which is LaQuisha Ewing. Could you just let everybody know who you are and just your connection and to Black history other than being Black? Let us know just why I called you on here tonight.
Um, I don't know. I think it's divine intervention or divine punishment that you call me. I don't know which one, but I'm LaQuisha Ewing, a native Memphian, been in Chattanooga, living for about 18 years. Came through the vein of public education. I often say that I was born into a family of preachers and teachers. I ran from both and indirectly landed in both, as I am an evangelist, international evangelist. One of the co-founders of the Sankofa Fund for Civic Engagement, which is an African American giving circle here in Chattanooga. Celebrated our 6th year this year, along with my sister on here, so she'll give her own shout out. We've given away over $200,000+ in the 6 years that we've been in establishment. Also, the founder of the Chattanooga Racial Equity Collective, which is a racial equity group of consultants providing support here in our local community around racial equity, diversity and inclusion training and consultation support. I can go on. I'm the CEO and lead principal of Unlearn Everything and Live LLC, which is a consultation firm where one of my niches is racial equity, but I mainly focus on organizational strategy, team dynamics, group dynamics, and crisis management response.
Thank you. Thank you. As you
Sure.
can see, now you see why I have her on here tonight.
And my connection to Black history is, it should be obvious, I think, but I am a student. I was an Africana Studies minor in school, and I have served in countless capacities around elevating the African American and the voice of African Americans and people people of color in general.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I know it might sound funny to those who are watching when I say, what's your connection to Black history? But as we'll learn in the conversation tonight, just because you're Black does not always mean that you know the history of your ancestors and just the history of the culture. And so that's some of the things we will be talking about tonight. So, Carmen.
My name is Carmen Davis. I'm a native of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I left to go to school and came back. I've been back about 20 years or so. My connection to Black history, I'm gonna start there, is solely because of my mother, and definitely by design. I always say, growing up, when we would go on, family vacations and all those things, we did not do amusement parks. She's not an amusement park person. She's not into sports or anything. So we did museums. Everywhere we went, we did museums. We did cultural things. She took me to Ailey every year in Atlanta. So those are the types of things and experiences my mother gave me growing up. So oddly enough, it would lead me to be a curator at a Black museum for 13 years. So I was curator at when I started the Chattanooga African American Museum, by the time I left was the Bessie Smith Cultural Center. So I was there for 13 years. Really loved what I do. It's hard work, it's passion work, and it is what I believe I'm truly called to do, which is preserve and be a custodian of the culture. So that's my connection to Black history. Right now, I work in philanthropy and corporate philanthropy here in the city. And I also am a co-founder of Sankofa Fund, as LaQuisha mentioned, and We Over Me, which is another initiative that she and I started together over the course of the pandemic. I also do a thing called 4 Courses In, which brings in classically trained Black chefs from across the country to talk about why it's important to keep your heritage in what you're doing, even if you are at a 5 or 4-star restaurant. They are Beard Award winners. So I do a lot of things, a lot of different types of promotions. I'm always brought in to book acts, to handle logistics. And so I do a little bit of everything throughout the city when it comes to Black arts and culture here in Chattanooga. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, thank you so much. And both of you mentioned the many things that you do, but you both mentioned the Sankofa Fund, and thank you all for what you do for that. That is a amazing opportunity for people in our community, and you all are doing wonderful things with that and the other areas that you play a part. So thank you. And we have Dr. Tanae Jordan, Senior.
Thank you, Dewan. Thanks for inviting me. I just feel so honored to be with these 2 distinguished women who are doing some phenomenal things in our community. And it is always a pleasure while I'm out there doing various things in the community. I'm always crossing or sitting in the same room with these fine young ladies. But I guess you want to know what my connection to Black history was or is. I guess the number one, I was born Black, and I'm very proud of it. I am also the father of 3 wonderful Black children, and now I have 3 wonderful Black grandchildren, and history and legacy is very, very important to me. I grew up here in the city of Chattanooga. I attended Chattanooga Public Schools, came along right during the time of integration. And so I helped to integrate some of the schools here in Chattanooga. And that was when we were going through desegregation. Graduated from Brainerd High Schools during some of its most tumultuous years, served as a senior class president there, the first African-American to ever serve as the senior class president, and been in the church all my life, always understood what the role of the church was for our communities. But it wasn't until I left Chattanooga going to the University of Tennessee in I'm dating myself, 73, that I ended up being a part of majoring in marketing and business management. But I also saw something that was very interesting to me, and it was called Black Religious Studies. Growing up in the church, I decided that I was going to definitely be a part of this Black religious studies because number one, I'd been religious since I was 6 years old and I was Black. So I knew I was going to definitely make an A in those courses. But when I got in there, I was blown away because it wasn't something that was talking about scripture, which I have been engaged in all my life. But it really began to talk about the role of the Black church in its drive and its role in our African-American community. Got so engaged that I minored in Black religious studies. And so educating myself and becoming educated on who I am, who my people are, I am just challenged to share as much information for those who are coming behind me. So that's how I got to be Black.
Now you got to be Black. Well, thank you for coming on here with your Black self. I appreciate you joining us. But thank you. Like I said, I'm so excited. We have lots of people joining us in the chat who are very excited. I see Black excellence. I see Renaissance women. And I think they probably didn't see you, Dad, but Renaissance women and Ms. Varner said we have a power group here tonight, and I definitely agree. And so if you see me looking down throughout the evening at my phone, I am reading the chat. I am not ignoring our guests, but I am reading the chat and trying to make sure we're incorporating your comments. So let's go ahead and get started with the real conversation. So my first question is, what age were you? Well, no, I don't even want to start there. Let me start here. Why is a Black history? Why does it matter? Why does Black history matter to you? Anybody can start.
So you want to jump in?
We can't hear you. You're on mute.
I'm telling him no drafting. If you speak first, you speak first. There you go, Pastor Jordan.
Why is Black history important? I am totally convinced that if you do not know who you are or where you've come from, you have no earthly idea where you're going. And I believe the absence of Black history that has been taught in our public schools and historically in our community, even in the church, I believe it has done a disservice to our community, to people of color, in identifying who they are, number one, in Christ, but that they are very much a part of heritage, not just here in America, but from the foundation of the world.
That's good. That's good. Carmen?
So Black history is important to me. Like, I don't never ever remember a time that I did not know that Black history existed. So I don't have like this turning point of one day, an aha moment, but because I don't ever have a moment where I didn't know that Black history and our great accomplishments were, you know, in abundance, it gave me a foundation of pride and just self-assurance in myself and my people, and understanding that we can do anything that we put our minds to. And that's why it's important to keep, you know, those stories and all of those great accomplishments and things that we've done in the forefront, so those that come behind us also understand that they can do anything that they set their mind to. We are a bad people, and literally we have survived so much in spite of everything. Like, imagine if we didn't have all of those obstacles that came our way. We would probably be able to levitate. I just really believe it. So like, that's why I think Black history is important, though, because you have those examples of people who came before you who did it, and then you can do it your way, but you know that you will also do it. So I too can become an elected official or a doctor or a lawyer or entrepreneur or whatever it may be, because I have a blueprint before me. So that's why I think Black history is important.
Thank you. Ms. Laquisha?
So ditto to both comments from both Carmen and Papa J. However, for me, I'm more similar, I think, to Carmen in that I don't know that I ever had a moment where it was like, oh my God, Black history, this is a thing. You know, being raised too with a very education focused, you know, mom. My mom was in education for several years. It was always put in front of me, right? It was like the option to fail was never there. The option to give up was never there. Now you do have the option to mess up, but you don't get to fail, right? Like you can mess up, but you're gonna sit at this table and learn this. And so I think right now that I've dedicated my life to talking about race issues, equity issues, nationally and abroad. The most important thing that I want people to understand is that history is a narrative. And so the narrative can be written by whoever writes the narrative, right? So if the predator is writing the story, then he's always the villain. He's always the victim, not the villain. Because I want you to see me in a certain light. And so when we start talking about history and Black history in specifics, we have to understand that there was a narrative that was given to us. There was a narrative that was set before us. And people right now, people are learning that the history that they were taught, even though it happened, it didn't happen that way, because people want their history presented the way that they put it away, you know, folded neatly and creased, not battered and bloody and screaming. right? They want their history a certain way. And so Black history is American history. Even understanding that Black in itself is a color. We've made it a culture. Black is a color.
Mhm.
We made it a culture.
Good
We
point.
can embrace the Blackness that exists because the definition of Black has been defined over and over again through excellence in science and innovation and intelligence. So
You know, LaQuisha, you hit it dead on the head about the narrative. The word history itself is made up of two words. It's his story. He who writes the books tell the story. And as you mentioned, that no one usually loses in their own story. You know, I grew up watching television, Cowboys and Indians. I never saw the Indians win, even though they were here in America when the Pilgrims came. So it's he who writes the story, tells his story.
That's good. And I'm glad you said that because that's what I was going to say. And I learned that from you. You know, that's what I was taught growing up. So when I think about why Black history matters, I'll tell you why. Because when I grew up, my brother and I, TJ is the oldest, I'm the middle child. This before Jermichael got here. When we were living in Chattanooga, we went to a school, it was called John A. Patton. It no longer exists. But it was TJ, and I think 2 other Black children in the entire K through 12 school. And so for me, it was just going to school. I was a kid. I was in kindergarten, first grade. I didn't realize, you know, it was race, but I knew that I was different because it started off with the hair. You know, a lot of the white girls had the long hair and I had long hair too, but it wasn't the same. It was different texture. And so I knew I was different, but I didn't really understand the race. And then I had my first experience when it came to race by an upperclassman when I was in the cafeteria where he poured my chocolate milk. He poured it in my tray. And he said, you have chocolate milk because you're chocolate. And it just broke my little heart. I didn't even hardly know what it meant, but I knew it wasn't right. And he was being mean. And I remember he did it maybe 2 times and I got in trouble when I would go dump my tray. And when I tried to tell them what happened, they wouldn't buy it. And I had to go to the principal's office. Thank goodness my mother was a teacher there. So she went to the principal's office with me and I didn't have to get a spanking. But from then on, that's when I realized like, I'm a lot more different than I realized. And then I remember one day, TJ and I came home from school and Dad asked us, do you know who Martin Luther King was? And TJ and I were like, no, who was that? And he went on to tell us a story of Martin Luther King. That was the first day that I realized that there was Black history. So I knew racism before I knew Black history, which is amazing when I look back, you know, on where I came from. And I think if I did not have my father at that time to explain that to us, and I remember he set us down, he showed us documentaries and explained who Martin Luther King was. But at that time, that's all the reference I had. So now Martin Luther King was Black history. So it took me years to really understand. And I think that in not our culture, but in this country, that a lot of people have that same perspective. Black history is Martin Luther King and it starts there. And that's not the case. Does that spark anything for anyone?
it sparks a whole lot for me.
You're right.
And I might should be last, Carmen, if you want to go ahead, because I want to kind of go a little definition.
Yeah. So for me, it made me think of one of the exhibitions that I curated when I was at the Betsy. It actually belongs to John Edwards at the Courier, and it is an exhibition on African American inventions. And so it starts, and the first thing that it says is Black people created, or how does it start? It's basically, we created everything. It's like how it starts. It starts with saying that we are the basis of humankind. That's how it starts. So it's like humans, African Americans. And so that was like to see it in those terms, to see it listed as we are the original people, it does something for you. So to start with inventions and that we are the people, we are the original people, and then to go from there and to go through all the inventions that we created and did and over time, all the way up until now. And there are so many things that have been left out and that have been stolen. So whenever I hear people talk about, they're like, oh, all I ever learned about is Martin and Rosa. And I'm like, well, there's so much more. And there's even so much more even to the civil rights movement than Martin and Rosa. And maybe now you might know John Lewis, because in later years, he became very prominent just from being an elected official. There's so much more than those kind of 4 or 5 people that you may have learned about. The women were, grossly underrepresented as far as telling the tale, because even within when we're telling our story, oftentimes it's men, that Black men that are telling and writing our history. And so they leave out a portion of even what our Black women have done. So that's a whole nother layer that LaQuisha and I like to talk about a lot. I'm gonna turn it over to you, LaQuisha, because I know you're itching to go on and get into it. I'm gonna turn it over. But yeah, that's,
This is our coffee talk, as y'all can see. That is my sister, and I love her dearly. And we do this. This is what we talk about on regular phone conversations.
Yes.
It's not even really like a panel for us. But I think, Dewan, one of the things that that I think that it's important for the listeners tonight to understand is that regardless of your racial identity, everybody on here has been socialized. We've all been socialized. Like, there was nothing more eye-opening. Carmen and I, along with a couple other friends, we went to Ghana. I had gone to Nigeria a few months prior, and we walk into a society about which everyone around us looked like us. However, we still stood out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everybody looked like us, but we still stood out because, as a matter of fact, we didn't understand anything they said, but American. They knew that we were American, and we didn't even open our mouth. We hadn't even said anything, and so we all have been socialized, and we've been socialized under this racialized construct. So it's important that we understand how we even get to this place. Mm-hmm. How do we even get, those, I'm going to geek out on y'all for a second, but, we had all of these crazy European scientists who were going around, think about the creation of man, think about what you learned in biology, and we had the classification, the taxonomy, right? Where everything was being labeled and named. Well, these geniuses, Blumenbach and Buffon, decided, let's give a stab at naming the thing that actually had no differentiation, which is humans. And so they start trying to figure out how to create, just like they did for the mammalia category, how to create levels and sub-levels of human. There is no sub-level of human. Mankind is mankind. God created one human being, right? And so through socialized practice and for the purpose of power, privilege, and control, we see this introduction of race. And so if you live next to the Caucasus Mountains, we're going to call you Caucasian. If you live next to Mongolia, we're going to call you Mongolian. If you live, next to the Asiatic folks, Australia, we're going to call you Australoid. And then we see the introduction of a word called Negroid, which is not connected to any geographical area. It's a color. And we're going to just say Negroid is everybody with darker pigmentation, which had no basis. We built laws on it. We started legislative practices as a result of it. And here we are today calling ourselves Black. Carter G. Woodson saying we need a history month for Black folks, when the reality is that God created people. You created Black folks, and we thank you because we made Black beautiful.
That's rich. That's rich. And that's the thing, like, Black history is not just February. Black history is not just 1 month. Black history is not just a scarf. Black history is not a dashiki. Black history is not Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. No, that's a part of Black history, but it's not all of Black history. And these are the things that we are not taught. Like, a lot of the things that you're saying, some of the stuff is new to me, LaQuisha, that you just said. And some of it is, I've heard it, but I was an adult when I first heard of it. So I think it's very, very important. And the unfortunate part of it, and Daddy look like he is just dying to say something. Go on and chime in.
No, I don't want to say anything. I'm just glad to be on with these ladies. They're fire.
They are. And I will say this. So last week I attended the RIE or REI, which is the Racial Equity Institute. And LaQuisha is a part of that. And so I attended that last week, and I've heard so many things about this training, like for the last several years, but this was my first opportunity to go. And I hate that it was only virtual, because I heard the first one was the previous one is like a 2-day training or something, and it's just amazing. But I really enjoyed this training. And so one of the questions that was asked to me by several people was, well, what did you think about it? Like, were you shocked? No, I was not shocked, because the thing about it is I've lived this. I know this, Black culture, we know this. The thing is, I just didn't have numbers to attach to it. I didn't have the statistics to attach to it, but I live it. I know this stuff. And so for a lot of people who attended the training, it was just a lot of people who were just amazed and shocked at the numbers. And one thing I will say, just through this last season, this most recent season of the elections and all of this been going on with the racism, the one thing that people always who want to stay in denial keep bringing up are statistics. That's all everybody want to talk about is statistics. Okay, so now in this training, you have the statistics. So now what? You know what I mean? And so a lot of times we like to attach an experience to a number. And I don't care if I was the only one to experience it. And it was only the 1% of the entire world. It doesn't matter. If that's my experience, then it affected me. And that's part of my experience and things that make me. So what for those have all you attended the REI other than LaQuisha? I know you haven't.
So you actually went through groundwater with
yes,
REI.
that's exactly what it was. So that wasn't the full training.
Yes.
Okay.
I went last year with LaQuisha. I will always remember that was a very powerful 2 to 3 days. And the data and the statistics and the information is phenomenal. It is amazing to watch people who are not African-American or Black to receive that information, because many of them, number one, have not lived it. Number two, they are getting this information for the first time. And certainly it cannot be true, because that is the life of privilege that I have lived. And I think that's the reason that the word privilege rings up so negative with a lot of people, is because the stories that have been told, the history that has been painted, not only was it painted for us negatively, but it was painted to those who are of other nationalities to elevate themselves. And so the real word that is out there now is not just race or racism, but it's equity. And that's another thing that I'm excited to be involved in as an advocate for our community, as a pastor who is in many of these meetings and a part of a lot of these agencies that LaQuisha is doing the training for, and Carmen in the areas that she's involved. It's a new day, and we've got to up the ante. We've got to turn it up in this moment. And I believe when I look at what happened this summer, after the George Floyd thing, and when young people were in the streets with Black Lives Matter. I know that messes up a lot of people. And they go, all lives matter. You're right, it does. But if Black lives mattered as much as everybody else, I wouldn't even have to say it. So maybe you want me to say Black lives matter too, okay? But I do remember this summer, one of the most powerful things that I watched, not just in the streets of Chattanooga, but in the streets of our country, but around the world, that there were just as many people of the Caucasian persuasion that were out there carrying those signs and chatting with people, because even they know the history that they've been taught the lines that have been handed down from generation to generation. Maybe that wasn't the whole story. And I'm going to say this. We are, as a race of people, the only people, for the most part, that came to this country that didn't volunteer to come. Everybody else chose to come to America. Black folk were forced to leave our homeland and come to this country. Therefore, it's almost impossible for us to even talk about our great-great-grandparents, or where other cultures can talk about who came over on the ship in 1621 and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
So to that end, Pastor Jordan, I agree too. I mean, there's a lot of our history that I don't care what, again, what race you are. There's a lot of the history that was either whitewashed or totally erased from the retail, right? So when you think about Western cultures, the griot is a staple in the community where stories are told down through the generations. And so America was not different than that. We had a griot process too. The only difference is when you had a dominant people who created white. Listen, y'all, whiteness was created. It actually didn't even always exist. People came here. They were Dutch. They were Englishmen. They were, Frenchmen. They weren't white. As a matter of fact, if you go back through the law, people were let into whiteness as their numbers were needed. So Italians didn't become white the same times that Jews became white. Like, this whole adage of whiteness always had to do with power. And so when people say things to me about the word privilege, I'll use myself as an example. I've been extremely blessed. My family's been extremely blessed in terms of education, opportunity, businesses, all of these things. I made a joke, but I'm really serious. I told someone, when it comes to privilege, I feel like I could probably, when the world was open, y'all, I could go a good 4 days with a regular business cadence and never pay for a meal. Because if I have an 8 o'clock meeting, they're gonna have Panera. If I have a lunchtime meeting, they're gonna have Jimmy John's. If we meet after hours, we're gonna get some Malia. Like, that was the privilege that came along with the work that I did, right? And I can act like it doesn't exist, but that's a lie. Because when I'm with my friends that are teachers and educators that are grossly underpaid, that's trying to figure out how to eat off $20 a week, I feel really, really bad because of the privilege that I've been afforded. So the thing that I said to the person who challenged me about the word privilege, I said, if you've never had to stand before the Supreme Court at any point in time in history to ask for a right to do anything, then you have privilege. So who does that leave? That leaves white, heterosexual, able-bodied men with power and money. Everybody else had to ask for rights. Women had to ask for rights. The lesser able had to ask for rights. Like, there's all of these dimensions. But the question is, who set up the game this way to begin with? That people have to ask for permission and ask for rights. It is beyond me to accept when people say things like, oh, that happened years ago, get over it. This is the story I tell them. I don't care. I am proud of the years that God gave me. I'm 41 years old. I came to Chattanooga when I was 23. At 41 years old, I am the oldest living person in my family to have lived my entire life in this country with full human and civil rights.
Yes.
I need y'all to think about that. My mother didn't live her whole life with full human and civil rights. My grandmother, that's not far-fetched. That's not a long time ago. That's right now. That I'm the first one in my family to have lived my entire life with human and civil rights in this country.
Let me ask you something. So you said, who created the game, right? Do you feel now that we've learned how to play the game, but we're also creating our own league? Or do you think we're just learning how to play the game?
I think for some, so the thing about, was that question to me?
to you and to anybody, like, you know, because we know who created the game.
Mhm.
And eventually we had to learn how to play it in order to, you know, to survive. We had to learn how to play it. And now we're getting to where we can get in the big leagues, so to speak. So are we staying in those leagues with them and trying to continue to play? Or are we just like, hey, let's create our own game?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? So as we say game, you know, we can talk about this. The comments and the statements that I'm making are merely national. I'm not talking globally, because the
Right, I
global
agree.
playground is totally different
Yes.
than what we endure here in America. I think what we've learned to do is survive. We built resilience, and learned to survive. And a few people, right? A few people learned how to gather some tools and build some things that created stability for one or maybe two generations of their family. But this is the problem. The masses of BIPOC folks, for those of you who don't know what BIPOC is, Black, Indigenous, people of color, because it's not just people that ideas been. Listen, y'all, Carmen, I'm gonna answer your question, but I need you to understand this race thing is deep, because right now, just about everybody can be white except for African American folks. Like, if you look at the 2020 census, you can be white Hispanic, you can be white Asian. I don't even know who white people are, right? Like everybody can be white, but I couldn't mark white. I could be a white person growing up in Africa, coming to America, and be considered a white American African.
Hey,
That's how convoluted this foolishness is, right? So, Carmen, I think people have built structures to where a few people, there's always going to be anomalies, but until we all make it,
yeah.
nobody's made it. Nobody, people,
Yeah, and that's
Oprah.
yeah.
Okay, is everybody Steve Jobs? Everybody not Steve Jobs. Just like everybody that look like us, not. I'm gonna shut up. I be getting
Well,
mad.
I mean, it's just like I used to
I think my
tell.
mama on here. I'm gonna behave.
Well, it's just like I used to tell people when they would tour the museum and we would start in Africa and they would be like, oh, we were kings and queens. I'm like, hold up. Everybody couldn't be kings and queens. That's not how anything works. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Everybody can't be Oprah. Everybody can't be Steve Jobs. Pastor Jordan, I have a question for you. Because you were alive during this time. Dr. King is quoted.
What does that mean? No, go
during
ahead.
the civil rights movement. And so Dr. King was quoted as saying, you know, I fear I am integrating my people into a burning building, you know, once integration happened. And for you, do you feel like integration was a help or a hindrance when it comes to Black business?
I'm going to take away the business and just talk. Okay. Integration, which was intended to be a even playing field, has been a disaster. Dr. King, and it's really interesting that as I sit where I am, being around during the civil rights movement, at 12 years old, I was walking with Julian Bond trying to get people to vote. So I have been, and I've been in, quote, the game all my life for the most part. But I do know that integration never took place. The word integrate means you take some of mine and I take some of yours and we integrate it together. But if you don't have anything I want, then it's not integration. You find yourself struggling to assimilate, to be like me, and the game. I think Michael Jordan placed in the chat a few minutes ago that every time you learn to play the game, the rules change. And so that is what has happened. So as I look back, backwards, I do believe that integration was a major problem for us as a race. We lost all of our Black businesses. I think that that's what you said. Once we could go down out to Eastgate, nobody went to 9th Street and Martin Luther King Boulevard now. But not only that, but nobody left there, Eastgate, to come to Martin Luther King Boulevard until they had shut us down. Now everybody's moving back, buying up the property. So ultimately, to answer your question, it has damaged us in a lot of ways. I'm going to say this. There was a very, very respected gentleman, and I'm not going to call his name because everyone knows him, but I love picking the brains of older people. And a few years ago, I had so much admiration and respect for this gentleman that I asked him if I could come take him to lunch. And this gentleman was very engaged on the ground floor for pushing to get equal education for the young people in our community. And I asked him the question that you just asked. And it broke my heart to know that this 90-some-odd-year-old guy who had been in this struggle for equal opportunities, that he would actually say, 90 years old, just what you said, King said, I'm afraid that everything we fought for integration, has really come back to bite us in many ways. So yes, I totally agree with you.
Can I make a comment to this?
Go ahead.
So, and I agree. Let me preface by saying I agree and definitely understand the plight that the Black business community took in integration. I would be, I think we all would be remiss not to mention though that we were talking about narrative building early. Like anytime the game doesn't work for somebody, they get to rewrite it, right? So when you really think about like Reconstruction was called Reconstruction because the first construction didn't really work. So we're gonna tear this down, rebuild it, and give you a story for the new thing, right? And so I think with the African American community in specifics, integration, to Pastor Jordan's point, it only went one way, right? When kids were bused, they weren't bused both ways. The people who had to relinquish were those people who look like the folks on this call. But I think it's important, right now I'm hearing a lot of African American folks, on various platforms, media, whatnot, talking about victimhood. Well, this is the thing. If in fact something happened to you, you talking about it isn't what made you a victim. What happened to you is what made you a victim. Exactly. So you can't fault me for talking about what happened to me, right? And so when we talk about businesses shutting down and people being haunted and preyed on from a predatory standpoint, and laws being written to include, exclude, at willy-nilly, at will. This is what we call the United States of America. I say the United States of America is a, sometimes we talk about this race problem in our country from a, what's called a dichotomous logic lens, right? Dichotomous logic. So what we say is, it's either we're all good or we're all bad. People almost deify America. We are always the good guys. We are the most moral, the most just, the most everything. We are we just the most. We do the most, but we are the most, right? And the reality of it is, when we penned, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. We had slaves. So the reality is that we're not, and I said this to a group earlier, we're not we shouldn't think dichotomously. We should think diuneral, which is like more unified. So it's almost the same Sankofa principle. We look back to go forward. We are both. Yes, we are one of the most best, wonderfully created democratic structures in the world. If you go to other underdeveloped nations, they don't have the democracy that we have. But we got some junk. We got some severe moral at the core foundation. Y'all, I can walk you from like 1607 to 2021 in legislative policy that is steeped in the foolery that we're talking about right now called race, because that's what it is. But the reality of all of this is, if we don't recognize that we have to retell the story, not for narrative's sake, not for nostalgia's sake, then it does sound like we're playing violin strings and we're saying, woe is me. The reality is that even those people that had it worse than some of us had, they have shown up, and we're able to sit here today on technology with our jobs in our nice homes, you know, but that's not everybody's truth. That's the thing that, like, I think we think that, you know, people who are just coming to this race conversation, they think either Black folks, I was in a meeting, I'm gonna shut up. But I was in this meeting with a group of white pastors, and it was funny because they wanted to create a program. And I'm the only person of color, only woman actually in the room. And they wanted to create a program, and they kept using the word poor and Black synonymously. And I had to stop the group because I'm totally confused about who we trying to serve. And so I said, may I ask a question? Are we serving Black people, poor people, or poor Black people? I said, because, and they looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, I am Black. I am not poor. So are you talking about me? Or are you talking about people with a certain threshold of income? Or are you talking about poor people, regardless of race? They thought that you would have thought I hung the moon. Because for some folks who have no engagement with other racial identities, they think that all Black people are poor, all poor people are Black, all people that are poor and Black, you know, they live on the same block, have the same experiences, they got to the same place the same way. And it's just not true. And so we have to realize that, yes, America was great. America the beautiful, majesties, purple skies, bloody, strange fruit. All of those things are America. We got purple mountain majesties and strange fruit hanging from poplar trees in the South.
On the mountain.
That was good. That was good. Let me address it. We've been going, and we have some people who are making comments. So I'm going to read a couple of them. They might go back a little bit. So let's just see. So, I mean, we have a lot of comments of people just saying, wow. Like, all I see is wow, and I love this conversation and deep conversation, and just, this is great. I'm really enjoying the conversation. And remember, you all can pose questions. We have some great minds on this call who are dropping some great gems. So make sure that if you have a question, this is your opportunity to ask some questions and have some things addressed. We don't have long. So if you have a question or you want to address something, go ahead and drop it in the chat. We have Gwen Davis. She said, integration killed Black businesses that I knew when I grew up. It is a double-edged sword. Then we have Ronnie Lackey. He says, I feel that we started to create our own, looking for ways to increase our awareness, our knowledge, and our opportunities out of frustration, anger, sadness, and disappointment. However, that is ours. They keep moving the starting line. Gwen Davis, I said, we were the ones that fled our businesses. White became better. We could then go to the forbidden.
Yes.
Then Jamiqua said, can we go back to the days of prominent Black Wall Street? The likes of that. Is that too far-fetched? Now let's talk about that really, really quick. Let's address that question. Who wants to touch that?
Well, it's a subject I love for sure. If anybody is Facebook friends with me, you're going to constantly see me shouting out Black businesses, giving resources and information. And it's kind of a two-edged sword, because I don't want people to get in this mindset of I got to go support a Black-owned business, but I go to a majority restaurant. Mm-hmm. I want us to get in the mindset that we just go to this business automatically that is Black owned. You get what I'm saying? So like, and it's not going to be because it's forced, because we can't go and because of segregation, but because we know that's the only way that we can really build up our communities and build up our people and start creating generational wealth. So, you know, yes, we can get back to Black Wall Street, but Black people have to make a conscious effort to support Black-owned businesses. You have to think about that when you're having your house redone, and when you're, you know, outside of the things that we always support, getting our hair done, going to, you know, soul food, all those things. Yeah, we're going to support that forever. Those are the easy ones. But I'm talking about those large scale things that you do, you know, and thinking of Black people, thinking of ways to invest together, you know, thinking outside of the box. But yes, we can get back there, but we got to work as a team. We are a communal people by nature. We're not monolithic. We are communal, people by nature. So we can definitely get back there, but it's going to take all of us making that effort to constantly support Black people until it becomes second nature. That's the automatic go-to. I'm making sure I'm looking for a Black-owned business first. If I can't find one, okay, I'll go to someone else. But my first thought is going to always be to go to somebody that looks like me.
Thanks for that. And you're talking my language now, Black businesses. That's what I do on a day-to-day basis, working with Black businesses, women-owned businesses. And so you're talking my language, and I'm not gonna put a pin there because we have lots of other comments. I teach diversity. This is Ronnie. I teach diversity in healthcare and have more than 10 years. And I tell you what, it's hard to play the game when I have the mic in my hand. I'm just saying. Then he said people become confident in what it is they think they know, regardless of how they learned it. And I think that goes according to what LaQuisha stands for with her business, Unlearn and Live. Like, you have to unlearn things before you can relearn something, you know what I'm saying, before you can learn something new. And I like that. Let's see, Catherine said, I say we need a round 2 with these great leaders and minds. I'm thinking the same thing, Catherine. So we'll see on the after party after this what they say, but I think this is a great conversation. And like I said, I have lots of go ahead. I have questions. I have a whole 2 pages of questions that I wanted to address, but I told them we got on, I never get to them because I like to go with the flow of the conversation. But there are so many other important things that I wanted to address, and we really don't have the time tonight. But I think we're gonna have to come back. Even if they won't give me any more of their time, then we're gonna steal something from them. We're gonna get them.
There's a comment in the chat that I want to kind of address a little bit, Dewan, before we go.
Go ahead.
And it's about supporting specifically this statement was about supporting Black-owned businesses and Black-owned, the accountability. So there's an accountability to Black-owned businesses, but there's also an accountability from Black-owned businesses that is warranted. And so, one of the things that we have to be careful is if and I'm not saying this about every Black-owned business by no means, but if you judge a horse by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid because horses were not designed to climb trees. And so when we measure our local, small restaurant to the conglomerate mega chain restaurant, in terms of, not to say that, listen, let me put a disclaimer. Everyone should have good customer service,
yes,
good product delivery,
yes.
But we have to be careful when we've normalized the thing. So if I tell people we've normalized Walmart, but everybody in America will tell you Walmart is not the best place to go get your groceries, but it's a normalized place. We normalized it. So when anybody does anything outside of what Walmart does, it looks really interesting to us because we made Walmart the norm. We have to be careful that we're not normalizing a level of standard to certain businesses who aren't getting the same amount of resources. When I think about what happened in the pandemic, the bandage of America was ripped off. I said to foundations and corporations at the onset, my phone was blowing up like crazy. And I was like, listen, take your HR manual and throw it out the window. There are no rules in this game. We writing the new rules to the game. And so I say that in the person who asked about this particular customer service and Black people having high quality service. They definitely should. But I know in the pandemic, if you can get it's public record, y'all. You can get who got the PPP money in Chattanooga, who got it, how much they got, and what bank supplied it. And so,
if we break down those numbers,
they can maintain a different level of customer service. Again, good customer service sometimes is due to lack of staff. You got your grandmama and your auntie back there frying, whenever they French fries. I'm gonna say French fries because I am not about to stereotype nobody. But you back there frying fries in your restaurant, And, mainly because grandmama and auntie are going to take a pay cut for you because you can't make the payroll, but they want to see your dreams thrive. So when the infrastructure is set up inequitable, if everybody who deserve what they get, equality says you hungry, Carmen, and you've never been eating in your life. You've been starving for 6 years or 6 months, and I've been eating every day for 6 months. And equality says, go get a loaf of bread, give Carmen a piece, give LaQuisha a piece. That same piece of bread that's going to sustain my hunger is going to kill Carmen, because if she hasn't been eating in 6 months, she needs other things to build her system up. She needs broth and juice and soup. Like, she needs other stuff. Equity says, give me what I need to play. You talking about we're in a fair race. You running and I ain't even got no shoes. Like, I don't really understand. I get really passionate about this because I believe that we have an opportunity in 2021. I am not an eternal victim. I believe that everything that we need as a people, as a human being, God has given it to us. We just have to plug in, rise above, and keep it moving.
The pandemic is the Jordan River. We're crossing to the other side. It is a new day. The rules have changed and everybody's on the playing field. Listen, I agree with you, LaQuisha. I was on a conversation with
Hold on, Dad. Before you do that, I want to address a comment because it went with what LaQuisha was saying, and then I'm sorry to interrupt, but I really want to address this because I'm not sure, LaQuisha, if your comment was based on this comment, but Jermichael said we have to be open to help make sure Black businesses are quality and up to par with competitive quality and service rather than bashing startups. And I just think that is so key with what you were just saying, as far as we have to be able to support these businesses and realize that they're not all starting at the same place. And so and I just saw this on a post last week of a new restaurant that has opened, and people were on there talking about I saw a roach in the restaurant, and then people were just coming, and it's like, really, like, they're trying, like, go to them, talk to them. And I mean, it just, from there, everybody was just on the list, and a business is trying to start up. You don't know what the situation is. Now they might end up closing their doors because of a comment that someone made. So anyway, I just wanted to address that. I'm sorry.
Don't fall in the group thing. Pastor Jordan, I'm gonna let you go, but don't fall in the group thing, y'all. That's not Black, white.
But I also think a lot of times we are quick to dismiss our own businesses. We'll go to J. Alexander's, have a bad experience, and we'll still go back. But we don't do that with our own businesses.
Absolutely.
We won't give our business owners, constructive criticism and say this is what was wrong. We're quick to go to Facebook and let the world know what was wrong, but we won't go directly to those business owners. But we'll give all those majority businesses multiple chances. We've all had horrible experiences at majority-owned restaurants, at Walmart, at Target. We've had bad experiences everywhere, but we go back. We give it another chance because we don't count that to the whole business. We just counted to maybe that one person we were dealing with. But when it comes to our businesses, we're like, it's the whole establishment. Everything is wrong. And so, we gotta be a little bit more. I'm not saying, like, to LaQuisha's point, quality. We need to have quality. We need to have great customer service. But we as a people need to be understanding and to be able to give constructive, helpful criticism when problems occur.
Absolutely. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Dad. He's probably used to it.
I don't necessarily have to speak. I grew up in the church. So when you say amen, that means you're on the same page. And so I can say amen to everything these sisters have said. But LaQuisha was mentioning equity. Equity, that's the word, that's the term. I was talking to a national newspaper today, and he was asking me questions along these lines. And I was sharing with him about equity. And inequity is almost like us being in a race, and you start toward the finish line at the 50-yard line, and I'm standing back on the old goal trying to make it the touchdown. At the other end of the field. You've got a 50-yard startup on me. You got the resources. We were talking about the PPP funds. I was in a meeting not very long ago, and everybody was congratulating everybody on the wonderful job that we had done in making the PPP happen. I sat there quietly, and after everybody got through congratulating themselves, I said, you know what? That was a great, and it happened, it was awesome. But none of the organizations that I know are on this list that we're patting ourselves on the back. So it was the groups that were going to make it anyway, the groups that had resources, that got more resources during this time, and those who had not. So this is the conversation for this season. And I'm encouraged by young people like you, Carmen, like you, LaQuisha, like you, Dewan, like those who I'm watching on this stream tonight. This is your season. I believe that where we are right now, as far as race is concerned, as far as the pandemic is concerned, we need to stop tripping about what's going on. We need to understand that God has pushed the pause button for some people to get some things in place, because this season will not last. The children of Israel had to go through the Jordan River to get to the promised land. But the Lord told them, go back and get you some rocks, because I want you to build me a monument, because I want you to tell your children. And that's what I feel like tonight. The things that I have experienced in my journey, I am having the opportunity to pass back and to hand back the baton to these ladies who are doing such phenomenal jobs, and so many other young people. And that's another thing that we have not done a good job in our communities. Leaders in the past have taken whatever they had with them to the grave.
Absolutely.
They have not done a good job of handing off the baton. And if you ever watch a race, the baton is not handed off when one stops.
That's right.
While you are running, that other runner is running up behind you. And when you all hit the same stride, you hand that baton off, you back up, and I'm handing y'all the baton tonight. How about it?
And you don't worry about, Papa J, you don't worry about how they run their race.
No.
I'm 41 years old. I'm looking. I had a young lady tell me, I'm coming for you. She meant it affectionately, but she said, I'm coming for you. I mean, I don't mean it like attack, like I'm coming for you in terms of like I see the seats that you sit in. I said, baby, you ain't gotta come for me. You can come get it right now. She was like, when you get tired, I said, I'm tired now. Because at 41, I'm looking for the 20 somethings, the 30 somethings, because I tell people, Langston Hughes has a poem where he references that he's a spook that's set by the door. I've been sitting as a Black young professional at certain tables in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I tell people I'm born and raised in Memphis, but I was raised in Chattanooga. I came here when I was 23. I've built my whole family here. I got married living here. I've raised my brothers here. They went to school here. I've worked. 23 years old, I was sitting at some of these tables, and they didn't value or know who I was at 23. But I sat there. I tell people I was like Frank Lucas. I'm gonna watch how y'all move until it's time for me to move. When God says move, then I'm gonna move, and it's gonna be strategic to the point that it's a checkmate. I ain't even, by the time there's Mos Def, the rapper for my hip hop heads on here, the rapper Mos Def has an amazing poetic line. He said, by the time that you get where I'm standing, I'll be gone. Y'all make moves, but y'all just move wrong. So pass the baton and don't worry about how they run their leg. Let the next generation run it to the finish.
Trying to give it off, trying to give it off.
That is so good. So we have come to the end of our night. You all have been amazing, but there is something I just want to address before we go. First of all, this has just been wonderful. I can tell that everybody in the chat has enjoyed it as well. This has been not only one of the things, sometimes you listen to these conversations and it's bashing. And that's what I like about tonight. It hasn't been bashing. We're talking about Black history, and Black history is it's something to be proud of. But the unfortunate part is everybody doesn't have a Pastor Jordan like I did. Everybody doesn't have a LaQuisha. Everybody doesn't have a Carmen to teach them about this. And unfortunately, this kind of learning should start in the home, but unfortunately, we know that it does not. And one of the things that we try, and Dad passed me the baton with Stop the Madness. And when I took over Stop the Madness, which was a nonprofit organization that worked with youth from the community, and before, when we were in Indiana, he started what he called the Heritage Tour, where he was taking gang members to different historical sites during civil rights and just teaching them about Black history. And then when I took over Stop the Madness here, we did the same thing. I mean, we went to Selma, we went to Montgomery, we took them on the Rosewood tour in Gainesville, Florida. We went to South Carolina. I mean, we took them all of these places, to Memphis, where they were able to learn, and many of them had no clue about the stuff they were singing and the things that they were learning. So if you're not learning in the home, we know that they're not learning in the school, and even in the times that they're teaching them this in the school is for 1 month, and it's about 1 or 2 people, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King. That's not enough, and it's not acceptable. And so I really wanted to get into a little bit more of how do we teach the next generation? How do they learn? And we ran out of time. So if there may, I keep saying part two, part two, part two. We will definitely have a part 2, even if it does not have, these are busy people. Even if it does not happen in February, we will have a part 2, because Black history, once again, does not just happen in February. This is not a conversation that has to be isolated to 1 month. And so we will be coming back with a part 2. Stay tuned on when that will be. But thank you all so much. Before we go, I want you all to just let anybody know anything that you're working on, anything that you're doing that you would like to let them know. And also, if you could provide any resources outside of this tonight, where people can go and start learning and teaching their children about Black history and things. We even have things in the community, the Bessie Smith Cultural Center. A lot of people don't even go there, you know, and some people don't even know about it. So things like that. We have Rise Chattanooga. Just share a couple of the resources available. And even after this is over, you can drop links in the chat so people can go back and see that. So anybody can go ahead. I know Carmen has some to share.
Yes, I do. So Bessie Smith Cultural Center, I'm not sure if they are open right now because of the pandemic, but they are a great resource to tour the actual museum side, as well as the historic markers. That's something you can do right now. It's free, and you can take your family all around town to learn about different historical sites and people there are a lot of them in the downtown area and along MLK, but that's, you know, it gives you text, it gives you kind of, you know, conceptually why this person is placed here. So you can learn about the Martin Hotel and Randolph Miller, Bessie Smith, and so many other people through that. So that's an easy way to get your family out and get them walking and moving. And so it's like a heart healthy way to get out and do some things. The library, I'm not sure.
How do they access that, Carmen?
So there should be a guide on. So I did a guide for the city of Chattanooga some years ago. I'm not quite sure if it's still on the Office of Multicultural Affairs website or not. But if not, you should be able to Google to find out where the landmarks are through the state of Tennessee. So that's another way to do it. And then it's outside of the historical markers, you have the library. If it's open, I'm not sure, but that's another free resource that you can use. And then, like, you know, there are tons of museums. The Tennessee State Museum, which is in Nashville, is another great place to learn about African-American history across the state. The Stax Museum, National Civil Rights Museum, Memphis Rock and Soul Museum. So there the National Museum of African-American Music that just opened in Nashville, which is a beautiful facility. I just toured it last week. So there are a lot of places that are within the state that you can go to. The Alex Haley House in Knoxville. There are tons of things that you can go to within the state of Tennessee. So it's driving distance to learn about Black history. So I encourage you to take advantage of them all.
Thanks for that. And just keep in mind, everyone, that as we said earlier, when you're looking at history, you're reading his story. So be careful, because it's a lot of videos on YouTube. It's a lot of videos and things on the internet. And so make sure that you're going to reliable sources to learn this information, or you may be learning the wrong story. So I just had to add that, because we're a Google nation.
So what was your original phrasing of your
Yes, the resources available where people can learn more about Black history and use it to share information with their children and just others, and learn for themselves.
Okay, so I put something in the chat. I put a couple of book references. Caste is a great book. Stamped from the Beginning, In the Matter of Color, The Color of Law, The Latino Threat. All of these are really good books. If you really want to understand how the law and our legal system kind of came to be through the racialized lens and the creation of race, you want to read In the Matter of Color. The author's last name is Higginbotham. If you want to understand how it shows up in law and wealth generation, valuation of property, things like that, you want to read In the Matter of Color. I put a couple of names for videos and podcasts in that you can follow anything that basically Ibram Kendi puts out. Austin Channing Brown, she came to Chattanooga actually last year before the pandemic, or year before last, before the pandemic. Oddly enough, Brene Brown, who is a self-identified white female who does a lot of work around vulnerability, shame, and guilt, has actually been trying to blend her platform to incorporate some racialized conversations. So if you ID as being white or Caucasian, there are tools that look a little different from people of color. And then Driving While Black, right now on our local WTCI station, there's an amazing documentary called Driving While Black, and it talks about what the automobile, the access to the automobile did for Black folks, and how it actually looked for us, and how it didn't really give access, but opened up, almost this arsenal of night vigilante justice and lynchings. And so you have that piece. There's so much. I could probably give y'all a billion books and podcasts, but you can follow me or inbox me, LaQuisha Ewing, on Facebook. I also do racial equity trainings with the Chattanooga Racial Equity Collective. So I got to shout them out. They're our local hometown trainers. They are people who've been doing this work for a long time. Shout out to Donovan Brown, Anthony Wiley, Sarah Baristecki, Josh Woodrow. Like, they have been doing this work. And so we have a local collective. I do work for the National Racial Equity Institute based out of Greensboro, North Carolina. So that's another good resource. And then I do a series through my own company, Unlearn Everything and Live. You can reach me at unlearneverythingandlive.com. If you have a group, an organization, a corporation, a church group, I do all levels of training, and we will be happy to come in and do a specialized training series. Where do we go from here is what we call it. And so we will walk you through the psychology, socialization, history, and application of how to navigate this race equity space.
Thank you. And LaQuisha and her trainings are amazing. So definitely make sure you check her out. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed. Pastor.
Well, if you read all of that stuff that LaQuisha shared, you'll never get to my little books. But I have a Black Exodus book that is by Edward Redkey, How the Nations Rage, as we're talking about politics and race and rethinking faith. The half has never been told. This is talking about slavery and capitalism in our country. This is the book that I cut my experience on. It was entitled From Slavery to Freedom. It's the history of the Negro Americans by John Hope Franklin. And then a friend of mine, young man that I worked with in Fort Wayne, he and Juan Williams did This Far by Faith by Juan Williams and Quentin Dixie. And I've got a whole lot more if you just check in. And then tomorrow at 6:30 on our spiritual checkup, we will be talking about Black history. Tomorrow we will be talking about Black liberation, and we will be looking at Moses, a man of color who led the children of Israel out. And we'll talk about Harriet Tubman. We will talk about Martin Luther King, because they likewise were Moses for our race.
Thank you all. Those are some amazing resources. And I tell you, when we come back for part 2, it's going to be a real good conversation, because I know everybody in chat will have read all of those books, watched all of those videos, and they're going to be ready. Jermichael also, and I was going to bring this up, and I'm glad he reminded me, on YouTube, now we have the whole series. Dad made sure that we had eyes on the prize. And it's a whole series of the civil rights movement and all of that. And that's what we used to show a lot, show the kids with Stop the Madness. And I mean, it is very eye-opening. It's very informational, informative, educational. So those are resources that you can check out. And so by the time that you come back next time, we will really be able to go deep into this conversation. So thank you all. If you have any more resources, if you in the chat have resources, feel free to drop those in there, and I might monitor those a little bit too. Make sure we it's some actual good resources. And someone else, I can't remember who it was, but there is going to be a documentary or a special on PBS on February 16th called I think it's about Black churches in America, or Black churches. And it is supposed to be a really good informative special. So make sure that you check that out. I'll go and find the details of it and drop it in the comment section as well. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We went over a little bit, but it was well worth it. Thank you all. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, LaQuisha. Thank you, Pastor Jordan, for joining us tonight. And until next time, you all have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, ladies. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.